Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Reds Rundown Podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob, and he's Joe, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Joe, we're on episode 6. How are you feeling so far?
We're feeling great. It's been fun doing the podcast. Yesterday we had Patty's Day. We had a long week of work with NFL free agency, with March Madness. It's one of the busiest weeks of the whole year. But you know what? We're no sleep after St. Patty's Day, no sleep after NFL free agency. That's what we bring you, Reds Rundown Podcast. We're waking up early on a Sunday morning to do this, moving Rob's schedule around, make sure we can do this because it's going to be a fun Reds baseball season. That's what we do at the Reds Rundown Podcast.
Oh, no doubt. And it's because we love you guys and we love talking about the Reds, to be honest. I think that hopefully that comes across as much as anything. But we always find a way to have jam-packed shows. We will say next week is going to be our opening day, kind of season preview for the Reds. So make sure that you catch next week's episode. It's going to be a banger. I literally promise you, because, well, I have to, and I want to, I guess. But we'll continue on. We'll start off, as always, with our question of the week. Ours is going to be, who are your standout players from spring training so far, / as we're nearing the end of it, who has it been overall for you? Give us one hitter and one pitcher. We're going to be doing the same at the end of this podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to let us know. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts, you can reach out to us on Twitter. Our handles are pretty easy to find. It's at Detulio Joe and at TGH Robert Haynes. So yeah, I would highly suggest you do that because we love talking Reds. No doubt about it. But we're going to move on here, Joe. Spring breakout games happened this week. This is the MLB's way of getting people to check out prospects. I like and hate the idea. I do want to preference that before I real quickly go through the two games that were played by Reds prospects. We didn't get to see Edwin Arroyo because I believe he's injured potentially. I can't remember exactly why, but he did not get to play. But we did get to see Cam Collier. He hit the very first home run ever of the spring breakout games in baseball. It was a shot to left field. He is a lefty, so opposite field power. Cam Collier has a lot more potential than I think people realize. He's just very young, and it was very raw when they drafted him. But I think he's somebody who's going to be very interesting, who we'll be talking about for the next few years. Rhett Lauder, obviously the Reds' big pitching pick, one that I know Joe loves quite a bit. I definitely enjoy him as well. He pitched 2 innings of shutout baseball, looked great. The Reds went 1-1 during these games, 4-1 over the Rangers, 6-2 over the Guardians. Joe, I'm going to let you tell me what you think of these games first. You already got a preview of what I'm probably going to say.
Yeah, I think these games are great. This is good to have more competitions for these guys who aren't going to be on major league rosters or aren't getting those reps. These young guys, it's really important to get these reps against guys who they will be competing with over the next several years of their career. Big fan of these games. I know I mentioned in one of our preview episodes that the two guys I was looking forward to the most watching spring training were Cam Collier and Rhett Lauder.
Yep.
Because I like the young guys. So I like this idea. I like getting them some good at bats now that they're not in major league camp. Good at bats, good experience for Rhett Lauder as well. So I'm a big fan of them. I'm not the biggest spring training guy, so it's not the biggest thing, but I do think this is a good scope into the future possibly for the Reds. Guys,
I'm telling you, the day that regular season starts for Joe, he is going to be a different animal. I'm just telling you. Right now, he's he's in hibernation mode still. He's just coming out of his sleep. But it's gonna be, like that picture that they have, that meme of the guy with the red eyes, I'm awake, kind of a thing for you. So I'm excited for that.
Well, it's I've been burned by. I used to get hyped on spring training, and then I got burned so many years. Oh, this guy's hitting 400. He's gonna come in and be the greatest player of all. And then he just hits 100, and I feel awful about it. So I've been duped before, but I do like seeing the young guys. I do like seeing guys coming back from injuries and working on new pitches and stuff. That's more of what I look at rather than production. When it comes to the regular season, production will be the main thing, and I will be hammering some guys on this podcast. So
I can't wait. It's going to be fun. My quick thoughts on this are, I love it. I love that they're doing it for free on MLB.com. I wish that they had found a way to do this on ESPN or somewhere else. I know it's really tough based on the timing of everything, right? With NFL free agency, I think, dominating for the most part during this week. And then you also have all the college basketball stuff going on, right? Different championship games and whatnot. So it makes it tough, but I would have liked to see them find a way to get it more into the public, maybe even putting it on public broadcasting, right? Because I think the people who need to know who these prospects are not necessarily the people who have MLB.com or MLB, the app or whatever they're calling it now for the live streaming, right? So I do think things are going to change. I think they're kind of warming this up, so I'm not going to totally crap on the idea, to be fair, but because I do fully intend that there's going to be a full MLB streaming service, like in a much better way than what they have with Bali right now, and they're going to stop these stupid blackouts coming up here in the next year or two. So we'll see how that goes, but I would like to see them put a little bit more emphasis on it other than just the baseball community, because I think, having younger people and even older people who may not, necessarily pay attention to these types of prospects, learn who they are and like really just hype up the crap out of them, then I think that would be the best way to get, the best out of this. Because otherwise it's basically you're just watching a minor league spring training game. So that's my only thoughts on it. I don't hate it. I really like the idea behind it. I want to see them execute it a little bit better. Moving on. We're down to 39 players in camp right now. A couple different, in case if you didn't know, that means that there are still 13 players to be cut by the Reds. There are some names that you will never see again who are still there. They just haven't cut them because they haven't really wanted to either see them go down to AAA and, start getting their reps, or, it's just kind of more of a formality thing, I think, at this point, to eat up some innings during spring training games for some of these guys. But the big names were Bubba Thompson and Connor Phillips going down to AAA, and then Eric Gonzalez as well. He used to start, I believe it was for the Guardians and a couple other teams at different points. So he will be a name, I guess. He's pretty buried on the depth chart, to be honest with you. But if he ends up being in AAA and potentially being a call-up if a couple more injuries happen, which we'll get to here in a second, that would be it for me. Do you have any thoughts on these guys real quick?
No, expected. Connor Phillips, love the potential of what he's done for us, but there's just too many arms for him. So put him in AAA now, and Bubba Thompson as well. I mean, good depth signing, and maybe he has a role now after we talk about some injuries, but he's a AAA player, so I think it's good to have this guy sent down.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Moving on, the Reds went 2-3 this week in their spring training games. Starting off with a win 5-3 over the Guardians. The big reason why we're pointing out that one is because Nick Lodolo came back. That was his first game. We recorded it after this podcast on that Sunday, or we recorded it before that. 2 innings, 1 strikeout. Big deal that he got through that. He said he felt fine. That was the more important part. Second game, lost 14-1 to the White Sox. We got absolutely rolled. Big thing here, Indy hits a home run. He's starting to hit well, which is great. Ashcraft, Cruz, Pagan, and Alex Young struggle, which prompts an Alex Young move to the IL. We'll talk about that here in a second later as well. Win in a football score, 19-11 over the Giants. Mike Ford, Tony Kemp, CES Stu, Luke Maley hit a grand slam, Nick Martini, and I forget who Alford is, but they all hit home runs. And Frankie Montas struggled. They had to take him out of the first inning. I thought he was injured initially. Turns out he was fine. They just had him on a pitch limit. But he's just said that wasn't good enough for him, and that's certainly not good enough for us. I know it's just a spring training game, but that was a bit of a concerning game for me. Then back-to-back losses, 7-4 to the Rangers, 11-7 for the Mariners. Farmer and Diaz struggled mightily in that 7-4 loss. While Diaz didn't give up any runs, he did walk 2 people, so not great for him. Fernando Cruz, though, looked great. He came right back after a bad outing a couple days before it, struck out 4 in 2 innings. The next game, Martini hits his 3rd home run of the spring. CES gets his 10th RBI of the spring. And Lodolo was a little shaky, but he went 2 2/3 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. The Reds have a game today as we are recording against the Guardians. And I think they'll play them one more time, to end everything before the season. Any thoughts on those games before we move forward?
Your boy Nick Martini is showing out. I mean, he doesn't hit for average whatsoever, but 3 home runs, buddy. That's a great spring for him. So
he looks great.
That was good. I like Jonathan India has been playing pretty well since he came back from his injury, and also playing multiple positions, as we know. So that's good. And I think this was a really good spring training for the Reds. I mean, I don't care about wins and losses, but just a lot of guys where they needed to have Good spring trainings. I'll save it from our answering a question of the day before I give out my answer. But a lot of guys who needed to have good spring trainings did. A lot of guys coming back from injuries have kind of like, staved off those concerns. Like Nick Lodolo, like a little bit, like he's shaky, but like he did have the good start, or the good outing earlier in the week. So I think this was a good spring, man. I think it was good.
Yeah, no, I think it's been really interesting to see. I think they've done a good job. I think Nick Martini has definitely been a surprise. I like Nick Martini, to be clear. I just didn't expect with all the depth that we had for him to make the club. But like I said, he wasn't going to outside of injuries. We'll talk about the injury stuff here, which may push him into action. But the other injury that we didn't talk about is Nick Martinez. He does have a slight rib injury. They seem to feel like he's going to be completely fine, but I did want to bring that up because I forgot to put it here on our sheet for the day, but it seems like he's expected to be fine. And like, this is part of spring training, guys. There are going to be injuries. This is why you sign depth. And speaking of depth, the Reds signed Justin Wilson. If you didn't see, I put out a podcast about that, or not podcast, sorry, a YouTube short and a TikTok about that. You should make sure that you are subscribed if you're not already, because, well, we're putting out, different information as often as we can. And I think there's a lot more coming in the next couple of weeks for sure. But, Joe, I will be honest with you, man. This one confused me. It still confuses me. Even with Alex Young getting put on the IL, they signed him to a major league deal. Now, he had been with the Dodgers in camp. He asked to, he got off the minor league deal with them because he wanted to sign a major league deal somewhere. The last place he was with the Reds. He did a great job in 26 games for the Reds. He came over in the Luis Cessa deal back in 2021. Actually, both of those pitchers, for what they gave up, I actually think that was a pretty strong trade for the Reds overall. But I am very confused because, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, this feels like either Brent Suter's not going to make the team, which would be surprising, or they're going to run 3 lefties in the bullpen, which means that somebody like Antone or Ian Jabot are not going to make the team either. Like, this is a big, big deal for the Reds bullpen, especially for a guy who's coming off Tommy John. He's in his mid-30s. He has been nearly, I wouldn't say elite, but very, very good for most of his career. I don't hate the signing in a vacuum, but like, considering what else they've done this spring, I'm really surprised.
Yeah, this is a move to feed David Bell's addiction to doing the lefty versus lefty, righty versus righty in the bullpen, because there are like 5 lefty arms you could see in the bullpen. And that's just not normal. Like that's almost never happened, if that actually does end up happening at some point. Like that's not a thing. So this is feeding his addiction. We'll be an enablers here by signing Justin Wilson, I guess, but that's okay. But it's just, you're right. Like, someone's like Brent Suter, I guess he has had a pretty rough spring, but like, do you really think that he's not going to make the roster? Like, I guess now maybe, but like before I was like, oh, he's fine. They'll start him off and he doesn't do well. Then they'll move him down and cut him or whatever. But like, now it's one of these things where like, where do you put guys? Brandon Williamson probably starts in AAA as a starter, like another lefty that could be in the bullpen. Like, I'm never going to say it's a bad thing to keep on adding arms, because we've seen how detrimental it can be when injuries happen. But for the start of the season, this is a hot mess.
Yeah, I will say the only thing that I think is worth discussing is maybe there are some secret injuries that we don't know about. Like, maybe this Nick Martinez one is a little bit worse than we thought, or I don't actually know if Jabot is going to be ready for spring training or for opening day. He didn't pitch at all this week, from what I remember, and I think he has been dealing with an injury, so it may honestly end up just being the fact that, like, they just have a bunch of guys who aren't ready. I guess they were expecting Alex Young to make the team as well, which says a lot about what we know, apparently, but it is going to be weird for them to carry 3 lefties. They must really see Sam Mola as more of a setup guy than a lefty-only guy. That's the one thing I can think of with this signing as well. And if it plays out that way, then great. That's fantastic, right? But at the same time, like, we just clearly, one of the things that I think is maybe a Cincinnati tradition, it seems like at this point, because the Bengals do the same thing. They're not overly transparent about injuries, Joe. That is something that is interesting to say the least.
No, they definitely aren't. And again, it's maybe that you're right. Maybe that is the reason why you keep on adding arms. And maybe it's not like hey, like, hey, we have Sam Ball as a setup guy. Maybe it's not like, hey, we're getting another lefty. Maybe in their mind it's like, hey, we're getting another pitcher from the front office perspective. And then David Bell will be the one who makes it more about, oh, he's a lefty. He has to pitch against lefties, which, again, good practice most of the time. David Bell is just obsessive about it. So that's why it makes me wonder how this is all going to shake out more so from the roster construction standpoint.
And to be clear, the reason why we're talking about this so much is because this is a major league deal, right? So that means that he is on the club, right? Like at this point, they wouldn't sign him this late for him to just get cut here in a week to a major league deal, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So you can throw out our bullpen predictions from even just a week ago because Justin Wilson is going to make the opening day roster at this point. Like that is outside of injury to him. He's going to be on the team. Apparently he's looked really good. But it does make me wonder what's coming next after this because like I don't want to completely repeat myself, but again, it is really important to note that this is a major league deal. If they had brought him in on a minor league deal, that would be fantastic. But you can never have too many arms. We've probably spent too much time on Justin Wilson, but it is really a shocking signing to me. You and I were both like, wait, what? When we were talking about I couldn't believe it. So we'll move on, though, Joe. I think the more important thing is the TJ Friedl injury. I just put out a short about this, but he rolled his wrist, according to Mark Sheldon, because, we've basically not been able to watch any games this spring training, which is a whole other thing. But he was making a diving catch, rolled it under. Apparently he wasn't limping at all. They're calling it a wrist sprain. I looked it up. It can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 12 weeks, depending on how severe the strain is. Obviously, he didn't do the Joe Burrow injury where he actually just completely tore it and would have been out basically for the entire season. So that's good news. But it is really concerning, Joe, to have him out because I don't know if people know this, but he actually got MVP votes last year, which is shocking to me, to be clear. I have no idea who voted for him, and I love him, to be completely honest with you. But he is our top of the lineup guy. He is our kind of our glue guy, to be honest with you, right? Bunting for hits. He has power. He, hits for average. He steals a lot of bases. Like, he's kind of that guy for us. And not having him to start the season, most likely, they haven't officially designated him for anything, but I would be shocked if he, makes the opening day roster at this point without. I think they'll give him some injury designation here in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I think the same. This is a brutal time to get an injury. We think about how important hitters have, like with their wrists, like when you turn over your wrist and you turn over, that's going to be tough to come back from. I am disappointed because I think he was one of the guys you could count on last year. We can talk about MVP votes later and how baseball writers are very dumb.
Yep.
Even though I love him. Yes. No way he should have been MVP.
No.
But that's for me. I think it's very rough in terms of when it's going on. I think this team needed a guy who could be that dependable hitter in the lineup because we do have a lot of young guys. We have a lot of guys who are erratic in terms of like going on hot streaks, going on cold streaks.
Yep.
So this is bigger than people might think. It might be like a slow start to the season. I really hope it isn't, but it could be one of those things where it's a slow start to the season. We're just not getting guys on base. We're not moving them over type of thing. That could be pretty bad for the start of the season, but we do have some guys. We have depth right now, so we have guys who can move around and play and cover for him while he heals. So he doesn't feel like he needs to rush back, and we can focus on winning later. So whether it's guys filling in for him, like hey, if Jonathan India is playing more outfield, that's great. If whoever like Spencer Steer's obviously going to be playing a lot, Jake Fraley, Will Benson, we have guys who can play in the outfield. And then we have guys who will fill in the roster, like Tony Kemp, Bubba Thompson if he comes up, as we mentioned earlier. Tony Kemp, I know a lot of people, Rob, I want to make this point real quick because I know a lot of people like on Twitter, oh, his position says second base. Dude's played a lot of outfield in his career, too. He can play center field for us. Very, very good defensively, too. So I don't think that would be a bad thing if he comes up, if he stays on the team and he plays well for us.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I actually think now, so we need to shift this slightly. I think so. I was just checking the Nationals starting pitchers. It's going to probably be Josiah Gray going for them an opening day. Because I was going to say, if it was a lefty, maybe Stu Fairchild would actually get the opening day nod in this case scenario. But it looks like it's going to be Steer in left, Benson in center, and Fraley in right. So I do want us to at least briefly touch on that. I think Benson is the guy to take over in center field. I think most people see him starting in right in general, but I think with off days for Friedl and stuff like that, it wouldn't surprise me to see him in center, especially against a righty anyways. I think that just makes sense to me, to be honest with you. So I did want to clear that up. I do think that that'll probably be the move that the Reds would end up making, because, again, there's no way Friedl's going to be ready unless that injury was, they're calling it a sprain, and it really was just a nick at most, right? But there are three guys. I think you already mentioned Tony Kemp. I think it's between him, Nick Martini, and they can still call back up Bubba Thompson, right? Like, it is just spring training, so I know they technically cut him, but they can finagle it and bring him back up if they really want to. I actually think that they may end up keeping Nick Martini instead, just because he is more known with the team. He does hit for power, right? They don't need necessarily an everyday guy, and most of their outfielders are actually pretty good defensively. Like, even Stuart Fairchild's a pretty good one, and he's already going to be their fourth guy. So I think if they will probably want to bat off the bench, which Tony Kemp doesn't really offer. He's not a terrible bat, but he's not really, like, the fact that he hit a home run during spring training to me, I was like, oh, Tony Kemp can hit home runs still? Like, that's surprising to me. He's not that bad, but he doesn't have like huge power numbers from what I can remember. And Martini has been hitting really well during spring training. If they decide to go Kemp, it's going to be because, like you talked about, they have a need for multiple positions because he can play. Like, he is truly a super utility type player, and he brings some veterancy. I still think that they'd end up going with the guy they're more familiar with in Martini over Kemp, but we'll have to see. It seems like you feel differently.
No, I can't wait. I know you said because of injury was the thing you wouldn't drink out of a shoe, but the fact that Nick Martini, after you were so bold about it, Nick Martini was making the roster possibly, which, again, credit to the Reds for building this depth, because like, even the guy I personally do not like in terms of making the team and taking a bats, Mike Ford, who's had a good spring, and I know you're going to mention that.
I was actually not going to this
time.
Rib
me for it. Okay, but either way, like, you could feasibly have him on the roster and have other guys move to the outfield because of the depth and because of everyone being able to play different positions. So this, you could look at it as like, hey, starting center fielders out, we got to get a center fielder. I don't think the Reds view it that way. I think they see, like, we'll get the best player for our needs, whether that's a bat off the bench, whether it's just a guy like Tony Kemp who play multiple positions or defense. They'll figure that part out. So it is nice to have that, that little, I guess, availability to do that. And I love where it's going to come down to either Mike Ford makes the roster or Nick Martini, and then one of us will be unhappy because of our predictions. But either way, once they're on the roster of the Reds, I'll be cheering for him.
I like Martini.
I'll
be cheering for him. He made sense.
Okay. All right. Well, now he's changing there. I'm with you. No. Like, once they're on the team, I'm cheering for him. I want them to do well, but I just don't see those guys being impact players. No. And I also don't want them taking at bats from other guys. So that's the. But I'll be cheering for them. Hey, if they hit for 400 in the regular season, like Mike Ford's hitting right now, then hey, biggest Mike Ford fan right here. So
for
production,
sure.
Baby.
Listen, the only thing Joe and I care about is winning a World Series. I don't care how they get it done. I don't care if Nick Martini starts every game, hits 35 home runs, and bats 215. I don't care, right? Like, that doesn't bother me. And I know, Joe feels the same way. Actually, this would probably be similar stats to what, like, a Mike Ford's absolute peak season would look like, right? It's just, these are depth guys, but like we said, like, this is good. The Reds have done an excellent job of going out and getting depth in case of injuries, right? Like, they're doing a really good job. Like, I know they haven't gotten the top end guys that everybody wanted, but they have a ton of depth. And the thing is like, that depth can get you through the season and get you to a point where you're at the trade deadline and maybe you're 3 games up or 3 games back. And then you go out and you get your guy, right? You get that last, like, okay, we need this guy to get us over the hump, whether it's catcher, outfielder, very unlikely infielder, starting pitcher, right? Very unlikely relief pitcher as well. Like, those would be the areas that maybe they could attack at the trade deadline. And this kind of depth is going to get you to that point, right? Like, we're not going to miss, well, we're going to miss TJ Friedl, but we're not going to miss him as much as we would have maybe in the past. Because if it's going to be Benson and Fraley and Steer starting every day, that's still a very, very good outfield, to be completely clear with everybody. That's a fantastic starting outfield for the Reds based on where they're at. When Friedl comes back, the fact that, obviously either Benson or Fraley are going to get less at bats is kind of crazy to me, considering I forget which MLB analyst it was, but somebody had Will Benson in their top 10 right fielders in baseball. So that was still crazy to me, as much as I love Will Benson. So it's like, this Reds team is very deep, and that's what matters. So we'll see what happens with the Friedl injury. We'll keep you guys in the loop if we hear anything more about it. Last thing we're going to do here, Joe, we're going to name one pitcher and one hitter that has impressed us during the spring season thus far. I'm going to start with the pitcher. I'm going to go with Nick Martinez. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I did not expect him to be this good so far. Like, look, spring training games don't matter, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's fair. But this guy's coming over and he makes this kind of impression where he's striking out guys left and right. He's going the deepest into games that most of our pitchers had gone through, his little rib injury that he's had. His stuff looks electric. He looks confident. Things seem to be working out really well for him. I am very impressed with him. I'm excited for him because I think that he could be one of those really sneaky signings for the Reds that work out really, really well. Because I think something that, like, teams like the Reds, and again, I'm referencing the Bengals just because we've been going through free agency, they grab guys when it looks like maybe they just had their best season and maybe they can't repeat it, right? But they're going to be able to get that out of them. Nick Martinez, the last 2 years, he went from being a complete, just like, I don't know if this guy's ever going to make a roster, to, a really solid pitcher. And the fact that he can start and relieve at such a high level is really nice for the Reds. So that's my first guy for pitchers. I know we generally would prefer to go with young guys, but I just think he did so much. I was really impressed. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, and the young guys are now pretty much out of camp. That's how it is. I mean, unless they're making the roster, so it's hard to pick a young guy for a full spring training thing here. For my pitcher, I'm going to go Tony Santillan, your guy.
Dude, he
Rob.
has looked good too. I thought about him.
Rob was talking about, I'll give Rob credit here. I'll tease him a little bit, but I'll also give him credit. Rob was talking about this guy 3-4 years ago. You would think that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ, the way Rob spoke about him.
I did not talk about him like that.
Oh boy, yes, he was like the next big star, and it was gonna be great. But anyway, Rob did see something in him, and he is, 4 outings, 4 innings, no earned runs. Don't know if that helps him make the roster,
Probably
but
not.
It was a good spring. That's the problem is 90% of the roster is set before injuries, right? And then you just the last 10% you're trying to figure out. And this guy pitched well, and it may not even matter. So hopefully he stays fresh in AAA, and then they can bring him up, and Rob can get his Tony Santillan City Connect jersey later this summer.
If he stays on the team for at least half of the year, I'll go get a City Connect jersey of Tony Santillan. I'll put it out there. I will also say, it's funny because I've been listening to a lot more Reds on radio. The Cowboy loves Santillan and is disappointed that he's not going to make this team because he thinks that without injuries, he would be one of the better bullpen pieces the Reds would have. So he's very excited that he's back healthy and going to be in AAA and hopefully be a guy that they call up later if they need him. So I'm just going to put that out there. All right. We'll move on to hitters. Joe, I'm going to let you do your hitter first. So in case if I stole Nick Martinez from you, who's the hitter that's impressed you the most so far?
You did not. I was gonna leave Nick Martinez. He has impressed me, but just the injury stuff, I was gonna leave him off. So I'm glad you covered him for me.
I got you.
There's a couple different hitters you can go with, but like I said earlier, I like that Stuart Fairchild was put in a position where he had to hit to make the team this year.
Yep.
Possibly going to be cut. And he did it. He's hitting 409 right now. One of the best averages for a guy who has 22 at bats. That's a lot of at bats for spring training at this point. He's hit some home runs. He's tied for the team lead with 3 home runs. And I think he solidified the fact that he made this team regardless of injuries anyway. So
Yep.
Friedl being out is like, hey, he's definitely making the team now. But before that, I think he would have made the team as well. Also, we're recording this on Sunday morning, Rob. It is his birthday, so happy birthday, Stu Fairchild.
Let's
Looking
go,
forward to seeing you hit
Stu!
some bombs. Let's do it. So Stu, because of the position he was in, because how he produced, I'm going to say Stu Fairchild.
Okay, I really like that. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm between 3 different guys. I'm going to just name them all, and then I'm going to pick the guy who I'm actually going to go with. I'm between Ellie, Luke Maley, and CES. Ultimately, I am going to go with CES, mainly for the fact that this dude is just raking. Absolutely hitting the crap out of the ball right now. He has 3 home runs, leads the team with 10 RBIs, tied with Nick Martini. But he also has 3 triples. I saw a video of him hitting a triple the other day. Like, he is so much faster than you realize. And I really do think that, like, he came over and I was worried about him being a potential middle of the order bat. Now, I don't love that he hasn't walked at all yet in 31 at bats, but I think it's just because he just loves to hit. He's not striking out at an enormous rate. He didn't last season either. I think he's just a big barrel to ball kind of guy, and he's got so much power. I just have really enjoyed watching. He has been the biggest surprise to me, to be honest with you, of all the guys that they traded for. I really did not expect him to be as good as he has been so far, and I'm really excited to see a full season of him. There's a chance that this dude hits like 40 home runs in a season for the Reds, which would be a first time in a very long time since Gino did it, I think back in was like 2019 or something like that, right? So if this guy can continue to keep the strikeouts down, maybe work on his plate discipline a little bit more, I think that he has a real opportunity to be 3, 4, or 5 hitter for the Reds for so many years to come. And it won't matter because now that they have the DH, it doesn't matter if he plays third, first, or DH. Like, he's going to get at bats regardless, and he can hit lefties, he can hit righties. Like, I've just been really impressed. I really have been. Like, it's kind of crazy to see. So that's my guy. I do want to give, again, the shout outs. Luke Maley's hitting .474 with 2 home runs, 9 RBIs. Like, that's absolutely insane. And Ellie is actually, let me make sure I got this correct. Yeah, Ellie is 3rd on the team in walks. 3rd. Now, he's still striking out quite a bit, but he's walking more. He's still hitting well, too. Like, it's been an impressive spring almost all around, to be honest with you. Most of the team has played relatively well. Pitching's been a little worse, but you expect that. That's why you have so many guys who are hitting 370 and 400 in spring trainings, because pitchers have a lot more to work on. And they're, figuring out new pitches and they're leaving stuff over the plate all the time. But yeah, you have any thoughts on those guys before we take it away here?
Yeah, I mean it's bittersweet, but CES had a great spring. He's the reason why Joey Votto's not on this team, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing because he is very good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see him play a lot of first base this year, especially after Jamer's going to have to play a lot of third base with the Marte suspension. So excited to see him kind of fill that role, play some first base, play some DH, and I think he could have a really good year from all the stuff he took from Votto. I think it's going to be a really good year for him, especially. And I was, we talked about Ellie a lot, so I didn't mention him, but Ellie had a very good spring himself too. I'm excited to see what he does during regular season.
Yeah, guys. I mean, this team. We can only hope that they're going to live up to their potential, and we'll do a much deeper dive next week. But this team is going to be fun, at a minimum. They will be a fun team to watch. They're going to put a lot of pressure on teams, and it's going to be whether or not they can kind of continue that through the entire season this year instead of just through like a 2-month span. So yeah, guys, we really do appreciate you guys listening and watching. If you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe. Let us know. Question of the day again: who is your top pitcher or hitter that's impressed you the most during spring training? Please make sure to let us know that, whether it's on Twitter or in the comments below us on YouTube. But with that, we'll catch you guys on the next one.